This is Helen, 10 years old. He's a cheerful child who has a lot of friends. Like other children, games and laughter is everything to him. His best friend Phil often goes to Helen's home to play with him. Helen's parents are always busy with work. His father often travels for several months, and his mother always returns home at midnight. Compared to others, Phil is a rather more mature kid. Both he and Helen enjoy drawing. Both Phil's drawings is always negative and creepy graffiti. He said this is sort of venting and makes him feel better. On a snowy day, Phil, as usual, takes his drawing bag and goes to Helen's room. Helen opening up the heating and welcomed him. Although it is winter, the heating in the room makes Phil feel warm. "You're sweating. Take off your coat." "I'll hang it somewhere," Helen says as he sees Phil sweating everywhere. Phil hesitates for a second. "No thanks," he shakes his head. Helen rushes forward to pull Phil's coat sleeve. He sees his wrist covered in bruises. "Is it your father? Did he get drunk again?" Helen says. Phil lowers his head, but doesn't respond to Helen's question. "Come to the bathroom. I hope you applied analgesic cream," Helen says. They enter the bathroom and Phil took off his coat. His neck and back are full of bruises. Helen's hands rub the salve on his back. Helen cannot imagine how Phil's father treated him. Phil's father is a drunkard. He was very violent to his wife and his child. Phil's mother couldn't endure it anymore, so she left the family. After then, the mother remarried and lived a happy life. Occasionally, she would bring some gift to Phil. His father complained about this. He distorted the truth, pushing all the blame to Phil's mother. "You should stay away from him. He isn't fit to be your father," Helen says. "I know that, but I don't know what to do. We're just children," Phil says. "I just don't want to hurt brother." Phil goes silent for a second and replies, "Things will get better, right?" he says, smiling bitterly. Helen doesn't understand why Phil doesn't fight back, and why he always pretends nothing is happening in front of everyone's eyes, even if it's something severe. One morning, Phil wakes up before his father does, prepares to go to Helen's house. He puts on his shoes, walks out, and after walking for a few steps, he sees something waving to him. "Phil, my dear, it's Mom," Phil's mother says. Phil rushes to her for a hug. "Mom brought new clothes for you. It's cold in winter. Remember to wear warm clothes." His mother has bags full of new clothes, toys, watercolor, and pastel, as well as caring words that come from her loving mother. Being able to meet his mother is the happiest thing for Phil. After chatting with him for a while, she's prepared to leave. "Mom, can't you stay with me for a little longer?" Phil says. "I'm sorry, dear. My husband is waiting for me in the car." His mother leaves the gifts to Phil and proceeds the car to where her new husband is. Phil picks up the gifts, proceeding to the park, and sits on the snow and gazes at the sky. He doesn't know what to do. Once, when he took the gifts back home, his father was very angry with him, and he threw the gifts into the fireplace and burnt them. He didn't want this to happen again. Just then, 3 kids came to him. "You had the bitch's garbage again?" one of the kids says. "What did you say?" Phil looks at him. "We saw your mother. My parents told me she's a bitch who abandoned her husband and child to live with another man." "No, she isn't," Phil says, angry and shouting at them. "That's the truth. The hell can you do about it?" he says aggressively. He pushes Phil's shoulder to provoke him, but Phil punches him, which starts a fight. One of the kids picks up a stone and throws it at Phil's head. The stone, as well as white snow, gets dyed with red. Phil falls to the ground, eyes open, and stops moving. "Oh my God, what did you do?" I just hope he fucking stops. What should we do now? Perhaps we can bury him." At this time, Helen waits for Phil. He looks out the window and sees nobody coming. He rushes out to look for Phil. He's worried about him, but he couldn't find him. He comes to the park and sits on the bench. That's when he sees some unusual colors in the snow, with some of them being red. He suddenly had a bad feeling. He takes off his gloves and digs in the snow with his hands. He then sees more bright red. This is not good, he thinks. Next, he thinks he's touching something. A nose, and then a face. Phil's face. Helen's best friend is buried in the snow. Oh no. Helen touches the face and cries. Just then, he hears footsteps. He sees the 3 kids standing beside him. They look at him with a despising manner and run away without saying a word. Helen doesn't know what to do. Helen doesn't know what's going on and doesn't understand what it means. Helen cries for a long time beside the body. until someone grabbed his shoulder from behind. "Are you Helen Otis?" Helen turns around and sees a police officer and his mother. The three kids framed him as the murderer. Helen doesn't have any evidence to prove that what he was doing. They know, however, Helen threw a stone at Phil's head, killing him, and tried to bury him, according to the three witnesses. After the investigation and interrogation, Helen goes home, entering his home, and sits on the bed. And after a few minutes, his mother comes in and sits beside him. "Mommy, I didn't kill anyone." Helen's blue eyes showed fear. "I know, but the situation is not good for you." His mother hugs her child as she speaks with a choking voice. There is no clear evidence that Helen killed Phil, but as an accused person, doesn't have any specific argument to refute. He doesn't even know what happened. The next day, Helen sees other children playing in the park, and all of them look at him. "Hi, what's up?" "You killed Phil. My parents told me to stay away from you," a kid says. "Dad says you're a killer." "That's not true," Helen replies. "We can't be sure. Maybe you're lying," one of the children says. Helen knows whatever he says is going to be in vain. All the friends back away from him. No one believes him. Everyone regards him as a murderer. "Helen, good news." Helen's mother wakes him up in the morning. "There was a witness to the whole thing. He's willing to testify for you." Helen is surprised. He can't believe that someone had to have witnessed the whole thing. He explained everything and finally let the whole thing end. "Helen, I want you to thank them tomorrow. Do you want to go with me? Maybe you can become friends." Helen's mother prepared some gifts for the witness. "No, I want to stay home and draw." Helen has given up making any friends. He's changed. He's become indifferent. His drawing is full of negative and strange graffiti. When it comes to the snowy days, he will remember those dreadful eyes of the corpse that was in the snow. That memory that is what he cannot forget, even if he wants to. The witness, Vic Stephen, 3 years later, has changed his name to Tom Stevens.